I think in the oral history domain and the association, in the literature on oral history, there's this emphasis historically on oral history's chief advantage is that it provides this history from below, the voices of the voiceless and the marginalized. But your use of oral history and the oral histories you've conducted, it's a bit different. Can you talk a little bit about how oral history has been useful particularly and how that's distinct from this conventional wisdom about the value of history?
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, surely the history of below, I think, is really important. But I always like to think of like my project, which is you have to take kind of a top-down, bottom-up approach. I mean, the voices from below are important. And if you're able to conduct the interviews, or in my case, somebody like such as the History Center, Oral History Center, was able to go out there and record them for you before those people passed. The voices from those within the power structure at top are also extremely important. Those give you the nuances that, again, they're not gonna leave a note in their administrative records of, hey, by the way, this is how Reagan's administration works. And I think there is something about a point of allowing them to have a little space from serving and experiencing that and have some time for reflection and then sit down, and talk about it. I think it's important. But particularly, I mean, you think of the growers that I interviewed, say rice growers hold themselves different than grape growers, big difference. It's not really labor intensive, those kind of things. And it's a different type of money crop. I mean, you're growing grapes. That's a pure cash crop. No other place, within our territory of the United States grows grapes like that. And so you're able to really specialize into something. Now, of course, the same could be said about rice, but and that's where most of our sushi rice goes, and particularly when it's exported, that's what helps subsidizes our Hondas as well, right, with Japan. But it's still a different type of level of income operation. The biggest thing that you could see, and this was the surprise of looking at this, is that Chavez waged one of the most in regards to this work, that movement waged one of the most significant challenges to what I call the corporate West, to that corporate community during throughout much of the 20th century. Is probably the most significant challenge they faced. And what ends up happening is, in that challenge, the unintended consequences is you just strengthened and galvanized and politically mobilized the very corporate entity that you thought you were challenging during the whole time. So that kind of insight and to really push me to look at that came from talking to a number of growers who have been in agriculture for a very long time.
Yeah, and it seems to give the lie to the assumption in the claims of many oral historians that there's this documentary record of the elite and the powerful, and we will provide a counter-narrative from below that is not there, that is missing. But the assumption is that the documentary record is just fine and complete. and if you could have a documentary record of from below, that would also be complete, right? But in fact, there's gaps everywhere. From top to bottom, and oral history is important everywhere you go. You need to get those stories down in order to have a textured, complex understanding of history, I think.
No, and you're absolutely right, Paul. I mean, it's exactly what it's for. I mean, there's things that aren't recorded. There's there's perceptions, right? I mean, it's funny to even compare. You could study the press reports of a certain event, and then you could go and actually talk to people who were there, and a lot of times they don't match, and so it's really blending that together to try to get as close as you can to that, I think, is really important.